Man, that sun is hot. Ow. If you want to learn how to pull off this effect using Videoleap by Lightrix, stick around. I'll show you how.
Hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell to be part of the conversation.
This video is sponsored by the good people at Videoleap by Lightrix. Let me show you what I did here. I actually filmed a scene using my iPhone of me just sitting on my deck on a hot summer day. The sun wasn't even in the shot, but I pretended like it was just up over my shoulder in the corner, knowing what I'd be able to do with Videoleap in the edit. I poked up in the corner acting like I'd burnt my hand on the sun, and I even pretended to pull that sun out of the sky. Once I'd filmed that footage, I opened up the Videoleap app, clicked on the plus sign, and easily found my footage to add right into my project. Videoleap puts that footage right in the main track, and that's where the fun begins. In the main menu options directly below, you'll find the Effects feature. Clicking on that opens up a new tier of options, and the very first one is Lens Flare. A simple tap on the lens flare icon adds a lens flare right into the project wherever the playhead is located. But you also have the option of holding your finger on that layer to either move it around in your project, or you can drag it down to the trash can to delete it. Let's move this over to the beginning of the project. Now, you'll notice these red circles in the preview window letting me know my lens flare track is active and that I can do even more with it. By touching anywhere in the screen, I can slide my finger and move that lens flare wherever I want it to be. I can also put two fingers on my screen and pinch outward to stretch the size of that lens flare. Once I get it to the size I like, I can slide it up into the corner where I had pretended the sun was when I filmed. The first part of this effect that I want to tackle is pulling that sun from the sky. So I scrolled over to where I reached up into the corner and found the spot right where it looked like I was touching the sun and beginning to pull it down towards me. Once I had that spot located with my playhead in position, I went down to the lower right, just below my main footage, and tapped on the diamond-shaped icon. This is actually Videoleap's keyframing feature. If you don't know what keyframes are, they're like little markers which tell the software to remember the information about whatever track or feature you're using at the point where you add that keyframe. So right here, I just told Videoleap, hey, remember that the sun should be up in the corner at this point. The next thing I did was to scroll forward to where I had moved my hand in front of my face, pretending to have that sun between my fingertips. I left the playhead right at this point and added another keyframe, but I didn't leave the sun up in the corner. I just touched my finger to the screen and dragged my lens flare sun down to where it looked like I was holding it between my fingers. I also pinched two fingers together on the screen to shrink the size of the sun as I pulled it down towards my mouth. Now here's where the true power of these keyframes really becomes evident. By scrubbing through the timeline, you can see Videoleap automatically fills in all of the information between these two keyframes, moving the sun down into position of the next keyframe and shrinking it along the way to the size I had made it once it was in front of my face. Now, you probably noticed along that path that the sun didn't always look like it was in between my fingers. So the way to deal with that is by adding a few more keyframes along the way. I found a spot somewhere in the middle, used two fingers on my timeline to stretch it out and give myself more space to work with. And then I just tapped on the diamond to add another keyframe. While that keyframe is still red, letting me know it's active, I just dragged the sun over between my fingertips. Now it looked much better, but I still had the ability to slowly scrub through and locate any spots where it looked like the path of the sun wasn't quite following the path of my hand. Here I could simply add another keyframe and adjust it. Once the motion of pulling the sun down to my face was pretty smooth, I had to make it look like I was actually putting it in my mouth and swallowing it. This is a very similar technique using the keyframes, but as I pretended to put the sun into my mouth, I not only added the path of motion to my lens flare sun, but I pinched my fingers together with each keyframe to make it look like the sun was getting smaller and dimmer as I tossed it into my mouth. Once I got to the spot where I had closed my mouth completely, I just tapped on the split tool to slice my lens flare track right at that point, grabbed the extra lens flare footage by tapping on the purple bubble to activate that section, and then I just held my finger on that segment and dragged it down into the trash can to delete it. Nice and easy. Once the extra footage was gone, I just tapped on the purple bubble above the lens flare section that I was keeping, and I added another keyframe to get that sun looking like it was going right into my mouth. I used 2 fingers to pinch and stretch the track out so I could do one more thing. In my head, I figured as the sun went into my mouth, it probably needed to look like it was being snuffed out. So with the playhead in place, I tapped on the animation option, which gives me other options to add an effect to the beginning, the end, or the beginning and the end at the same time. So I chose to add animation just to the end. Tapping that gives me my animation options, and I chose fade out. Now I'm scrolled in very closely, but you can see an animation has been added to the end of my lens flare. You can also see there is a fader that's now present below the main footage. This controls how long or short you want that fade to be. As I dial that back, you can see the fade at the end get shorter. Now as I scrub through the project, you can see the sun actually fade out as it goes into my mouth. A couple of last-minute adjustments to the end, and I've got it looking pretty good. The next major effect that I needed to create was me spitting the sun back into the sky after it had burned up the inside of my mouth. So I found the spot where it looked like I was just starting to spit something out, scrolled over to the effects option again, and added another lens flare. I repeated the exact same steps I had done earlier, only in reverse. This time I pinched my 2 fingers together on screen to shrink that sun down and moved it right over to my lips. I also added a keyframe right here to let Videoleap know that I wanted it to remember the size and location of that lens flare sun at this point in the timeline. Then I scrolled forward to the spot where I thought the sun should be right back where it started in the corner, and I just added another keyframe. Then it was just a matter of keeping that keyframe activated, stretching the sun back out, and moving it back up into the corner. This was a lot easier than the first step because I didn't have to follow my hand at all. I just spit that ball of flame right back up into the sky. Now, while I was busy completely overacting, sorry Hollywood, I thought about how I could use even more of Videoleap's features to really take this effect to the next level. My first thought was that if I had actually put the sun in my mouth, the world would have gotten quite a bit darker with no sun up in the sky. So I scrolled back to the point right where my mouth closed around my lens flare sun, and I hit the back arrow in the lower left to back out of the lens flare track options. Whenever you need to get back to the main menu, use that left arrow to back out of the options that you may be in. I then scrolled over to the filters tab and added a filter right at that spot. Clicking on the presets options gives you access to a bunch of filters which allow you to completely change the look of your footage. The FX1 filter gave me that dark, dreary, lack of sun look that I was going for. Next, I just added a fade in by clicking on the animation option and chose the in option and then selecting fade in. Now, I only need this filter to last as long as the sun is in my mouth, and I showed you how to splice that footage earlier. But another option is to pinch and shrink your project view, find the end of your track or effect, press and hold your finger on the end of it, and drag it back to shorten it. One really cool feature is Videoleap actually vibrates when you've reached the start point or end point of another track, letting you know you're in perfect alignment. I actually wanted this to start a little past the point of where I spit out the sun so that I could add another fade out as if the world slowly got brighter as the sun shot back into position. To do this, I clicked the animation option, selecting out for my fade out, and then choosing fade out got me exactly what I wanted. A quick dialing back of the fade length with the fader underneath to get the timing right, and now it's really beginning to look like I brought sunshine back to the planet. There was another part of this effect that I needed to address next, and that was where I had pretended to reach up to touch the sun and I burnt my finger. So I scrolled back in my main track, found that spot where it looked like my hand had made connection, and I used the track options menu below to find the split tool and slice that footage right there. Next, I found the spot where it looked like I was jerking my hand back away in pain and dropped another slice using the split tool right at that point. While I had that very short couple of frames that I had separated out still selected, up in the preview window, I pinched my 2 fingers on the screen and spread them outwards to zoom my footage in ever so slightly. I repositioned myself just a touch so that my body position made sense, and now when I touch the sun, the footage actually looks like it jumps out at you for just a couple of frames. The next thing I did was to use the main menu below to find another effect right at that spot, but this time I chose the glitch feature and selected the etch option. This effect reminded me of how a television looks when the signal gets fuzzy or scrambled, and I thought the idea of a mini solar flare from me touching the sun made a lot of sense here. The density option put a fader on screen, which basically allowed me to pull back the intensity of this glitch effect. I like this look so much that I even added the same effect to the area where I reached up and pulled the sun out of the sky. Next, I just needed to add some audio effects to bring this whole thing home. In the audio tab of the main menu, Videoleap now gives you options to access music, sound effects, and loops from both the Videoleap library as well as my favorite asset house, Storyblocks. Using the search bar option, I was able to find a sound that I wanted, listen to it quickly to see if it would work, and then a one-click download put that audio effect right into my project where the playhead was located. Adding a music bed to this project was just as easy, with a lot of amazing tracks and artists to choose from. Once I had my audio tracks in place, the volumes where I liked them, and everything tweaked where it looked pretty convincing, I just clicked on the export button in the upper right, chose the resolution, which I should mention goes all the way up to 4K, and the frame rate of my final export, and clicked save. Videoleap not only saves your final export to your phone in the gallery, but it saved every step of my project along the way as I made each individual change right up in the Projects tab, so I can easily come back and work on it some more or create an entirely new project. If you want to learn more about Videoleap by Lightricks for your mobile device, click the links on screen now or the ones I'll put down below to get you started editing incredible looking videos right from the palm of your hand today. Peace.